In this video, we'll do a brief introduction to what homeostasis is and why it's important in our bodies. So homeostasis is the body's maintenance of an internal steady state. Our body works best under certain conditions. So for instance, our blood pH should be around 7.35, our body temperature 37 degrees Celsius, and our blood sugar is about 0.1% concentration. So if we look at this body over here, you can see that in the brain there's a couple of structures. So the first one is the hypothalamus, which is considered the control center of the brain, and it monitors change throughout the body and then releases hormones to act on the body to bring things back to the regular state. There's the little green structure is right adjacent to the hypothalamus, and that's the pituitary gland. There's actually two parts to the pituitary gland, the anterior and the posterior pituitary, and it either uses hormones that are produced by the hypothalamus or produces its own and releases them when the hypothalamus tells it to. But it also produces hormones that help control our body. So they would do anything to like perhaps control our breathing rate or the depth of our breathing, our heart rate, our liver, our pancreas, our kidneys, and so on. So homeostasis is maintaining that internal steady state. Whenever balance is lost, the body will start making changes to maintain that steady internal environment. And this process is called a dynamic equilibrium because it continually keeps conditions within a range of acceptable values. So if the value rises above the accepted value, then changes will occur to bring it back to the level, or if a level drops below the acceptable, changes will be made to bring it back up. Negative feedback loops resist change. So when a level drops outside the acceptable values, changes will be made to bring the level back to the accepted. And a negative feedback loop would be like a thermostat. So if we have a thermostat on our house and it's set for 21 degrees Celsius, if the temperature goes up higher than 21 degrees Celsius, then the air conditioning will come on to bring it back down. And if the level drops below 21 degrees, then the furnace will come on to bring the temperature back up. So negative feedbacks resist change. Maintaining our blood sugar levels, maintaining our body temperature are examples of negative feedback. We'll look a little bit deeper into temperature regulation because that's one of our classic examples that we use to describe negative feedback loops. So here is a person and they're happy, their body temperature is what they want, but if they get overheated and their body temperature increases, there's going to be changes set into place to bring the body temperature back to the acceptable level. So first thing that would happen is the hypothalamus would detect the increased body temperature, and it would cause blood vessels at the skin surface to dilate, and that will increase blood flow to the skin and then the release of heat from the skin through evaporative cooling, so through sweating. So it'll also cause our sweat glands to function, and when the sweat evaporates from the body will cool. And once that temperature decreases back to the acceptable value, this cooling process will stop. Now, if we are too cold and our body temperature decreases, the hypothalamus will cause the blood skin vessels to constrict and will prevent blood from going to the skin and actually redirect it to the core, which is why our fingers and our toes and our nose get cold when we're outside in the cold, because we want to protect our vital organs more than the tips of our nose. So it will reduce losing heat from the body that way. The hypothalamus will also cause our skeletal muscles to start contracting through a process known as shivering, and shivering will begin and generate heat. Our body hairs can also stand up and prevent further heat loss. Now, this is sort of a throwback to when we had more hair on our bodies. If we had hair, lots of hair, and our hair cells would stand up through goosebumps, we actually would create an insulating layer around us where we could trap warm air, but the goosebumps don't really help anymore. So once the temperature increases, the hypothalamus will stop the warming process and be back at normal. So a positive feedback loop actually amplifies change, so the conditions will move further from the steady state. And these processes are rarer in the body, and the purpose for them is to carry out a process quickly. So a couple of examples of positive feedback would be, for instance, the birth process. So if there's a decrease in progesterone, it will cause uterine contractions, which will cause the release of oxytocin, which is a hormone released from the brain, which will cause stronger contractions. And then the baby will start to move along the birth canal, which will cause more oxytocin to be released, which will cause even stronger contractions, and then more oxytocin, and then stronger contractions until eventually the baby is born. So that would be a positive feedback. The idea is to get the process over as quickly as possible. Another example would be the flight or fight response. So if we see a bear and it jumps out at us, our body will respond for flight or fight. So our heart rate will increase, our bronchi will dilate so we can bring in more air, and a whole bunch of other responses will occur so that we can either fight the bear or run away from the bear. So that would be another example of a positive feedback. Normally having an elevated heart rate, elevated breathing rate is not good, but if we need to get away from danger, it's really good. So we take ourselves away from the rest state and get ourselves out of the danger. So that's another example of positive feedback.